Hi, and welcome to my 13 horrifically silly days of Halloween. Today I have for you filmmaker David Fernandes. David, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And now, please do tell me a bit about yourself, your background as a producer, director, and a writer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm primarily a director, but as a means to an end to have stuff to direct, I also write and produce. Uh, like I like writing, producing. I like less so. So I'm trying to level up to get other people to produce things, and I can kind of like reduce the number of hats I have to wear on set. I got into filmmaking when I was pretty young. My parents never had a video camera, but I had friends who did. I'm almost 50, so I was a kid in the 80s. But we would fool around with them and make our own little videos, and the kind of immediacy of that was very addicting to me as a little kid because you could film something and then play it back right away and watch it, and you were like, "Whoa, we did that," you know. So that was fun. In university, I ended up studying film, but that was all theoretical. So I went and did some practical stuff after that, but ended up working in graphic design for 10 years before kind of coming back to the film thing. So I made my first short film in 2009. It was called Rewire. It premiered at Fantasia and opened for the Toronto premiere of the Human Centipede in Toronto at the
Oh,
Bloor Cinema. So I had a great big audience for that, who stayed to watch my film because it opened for the Human Centipede, and that's what they were actually there for. Um, so that was great. That was like a nice little start to things, and it took me a while to make more films after that. But as of a few years ago, I've kind of stopped doing other things. So I don't. I used to have a client business where I was making movies for other people, a lot of political kind of ads and campaign kind of things, and I just sort of folded that up right before the pandemic hit, and then the pandemic hit, and I was like, okay, like that's good timing.
yes.
So I kind of downscaled and started focusing on trying to produce television and film projects as a full-time kind of thing. So it's taken a few years and a pandemic to get things rolling, but Creepy Bits was the first my first attempt at doing something serialized. So the stories aren't serialized, but it's a series.
Right. Six
And
episode
so
television series, is that correct?
yeah, they're very short. They're like 3 minutes, so I call them bite sized.
Yeah.
They're and you're gonna be able to watch them. Like they were on YouTube. We did a live launch every week last year leading up to Halloween. So the 6 weeks before Halloween, we launched one episode a week, and then on Halloween Eve we had the finale, and it went pretty well. Lots of great comments, tons of media exposure and stuff. I considered that success for something that I self-funded basically out of my own pocket and cost me 3 times more than I wanted it to. Uh, I've basically been able to get a broadcast deal for it. So it's going to be on Hollywood Suite in Canada coming out. So Hollywood Suite is carried by Rogers and Bell and Telus across the country. So they're sort of like they're not like the movie network, but they're kind of an addendum to that sort of thing, and they have a lot of original programming that they do as well. So they do something called Shocktober.
Ah,
So
yes.
it'll be on TV in Canada, on cable, on Hollywood Suite during October this year, and it's also going to be on Bloody Disgusting. Bloody Disgusting is a big horror blog from the U.S. They they have a streaming station now as well, sort of like a very minor Shutter competitor, I guess you could say, although they're also big fans of Shutter. And so they run that as an AVOD service, so advertising video on demand. So it is free, and you can get it on a bunch of different apps and stuff. It's called BDTV, so Bloody Disgusting TV. And they were bought out by Cinedigm last year, and so we're just sort of waiting for their legal contracts to turn over, and then it's going to be on BDTV this year as well. So in the next couple of months, you'll be able to watch it on BDTV or on Hollywood Suite. So if you're not in Canada, you can watch it on BDTV, basically anywhere in the world. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Is there anything you're able to uh, sort of tell me about Creepy Bits a little bit, and or the cast and crew, anything
Sure,
like that?
yeah. Well, the idea kind of came up from like I have a good friend, Gregory Bennett, who was also the cinematographer on this. And we were, I mean, we didn't do much during the pandemic. I was mostly daddy daycare for my then 4 and 5 year old kid. And then now she's almost 7. But uh, so we were both really bored and chomping at the bit to do something. So, and I'd had this idea in the past about doing really ultra short horror things just for the web, because everything else I've done has been kind of aimed at film festivals and that sort of thing. And you have to be at a film festival to watch those films, right? So I always thought it was cool that people put their films on the internet, just see what happens, kind of thing. So I wanted to try that, and so these were really like devised for social media,
Mhm.
and they are kind of lighter on the violence and gore uh, on purpose because I wanted to. I had heard rumors that TikTok was going to go to a 3 minute length from their 1 minute length, and that ended up happening. So,
Right.
so I kind of wrote them all so that they could fit in a TikTok video. And I even made vertical versions of them, which some people would like think is sacrilegious, but I'm like, I don't know. I mean, you can still watch the widescreen version wherever you want, right?
Yeah.
So that was a TikTok specific version. It was on Instagram, it was on Facebook, a couple other platforms, I think. And so we would launch them live once a week. They're all very different. Like I said, it's an anthology, so they're like they take place in totally different places. But I wrote them around what I had access to here in Hamilton, Ontario.
Right.
So there's a bunch of filming that happens here, like big productions, and as a result, there's a bunch of smaller studios that have standing sets. So a standing set is like a set that doesn't get torn down. Like people just come in and they redress it and then they relight it and they film it and it looks different.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty good friends with the Digital Canaries owner, Simon Winterson, who ended up coming on board to produce the series. So we shot 4 of the 6 episodes at Digital Canaries. So all in an old Catholic school in the east end of Hamilton. So that subbed for a hospital ward, for a police interrogation room, for a school. It played as a school as well. And then there was one more that we shot in there, and it's escaping me at the moment. But there were 4 of them in there. One of them I shot at my house, and then one of them I shot in some underground tunnels under an industrial building here in Hamilton that was originally designed by Nikola Tesla to house a bunch of hydroelectric equipment at the turn of the century when Niagara Falls power generating station had just come online, and they were feeding this big energy stuff. And this was like a substation here in Hamilton. All the equipment's now gone, but there were underground tunnels to keep all that stuff cool. And so a friend of mine's leasing the building, Christoph Benfey. He's got a studio there called Low Key Studio, which is now, I think he's calling that part of his studio operation Evil Empire. So underneath Evil Empire are really creepy underground tunnels. So we filmed one of the episodes under there. So I basically just I took the coolest locations I could find that I had access to that I didn't really have to pay much for,
Right.
and then wrote the stories around the locations because it was all extremely low budget. So yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah.
That's super cool background info on that. So
Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
excited
and
to
sorry,
dive into
the other one that we did of Digital Canaries was actually on a plane because Simon's a bit of a mad scientist, and he found a decommissioned cargo plane and bought the interior of a decommissioned passenger jet that was more or less from the same model, and so he rebuilt the interior of the plane in a studio. And we were actually the first ones to film on it as a complete set because he only had half of it before, and we convinced him to put the roof on and the galley in the back, the kitchen and the bathroom and everything. So it's pretty cool, and he's had a bunch of people film on it since then. So and that's kind of been like an ongoing thing with Simon and I, is like I get him to build weird things and then he rents them out to other people. So and then we make them look really cool, and it ends up being kind of branded content for his studio. So
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
terrific. Wow.
yeah, it's all a little bit
Yeah.
of a kind of like ecosystem, I guess, of
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, I would also like to hear a little bit about some of your short films, particularly Binge and Rewire,
Yeah,
which you also directed and wrote, correct?
yep.
Yeah.
Produced, edited, la la la. Yeah, well, too many ads. Um, Rewire and Binge are both they're similar in terms of, like, they're more like psychological horror, so they're not like overtly. I haven't done anything that's really like overtly kind of bloody and gory and kind of your classic kind of like scary horror.
Yeah.
The stuff I'm working on next, I think, is going to tread into that territory. I'm kind of
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, but those two are they're very like psychological thriller, psychological horror kind of thing. So Rewire is about a guy who goes to find this doctor who basically is using some kind of like a head um, uh, like scanner thing to change people's brainwave patterns.
Right.
And so he thinks that by giving this guy some money, this doctor can rewire his brain and get rid of his fear because he's very anxious. And so that's kind of the setup is he goes to this doctor to have his fear removed, and it doesn't quite go as planned, of course. Um, and then Binge is about a woman who has this envelope delivered at her doorstep, and inside it is a USB key, and on the USB key ends up being a strange video with a strange man on it who's not really saying anything, but there's all these sounds and light patterns and stuff, and it sort of kind of hypnotizes her. And then it ends with coordinates, and when she types them in, turns out to be like like latitude, longitude kind of coordinates, and
Right.
so it leads her somewhere. And then when she goes there, she finds another clue, and it leads her somewhere else. And so it's kind of like a bit of a wild goose, like a bit of a scavenger hunt type thing, a high tech scavenger hunt. And of course, that leads her somewhere. She thinks it's her. She thinks it's a guy she's dating who's like just playing some romantic kind of like come find me kind of game.
Right.
And it turns out a little differently than she expected, of course. Uh, so that's Binge. Um, yeah, and those are the only two shorts I've done other than the six in Creepy Bits. And I co-directed a comedy, a feature comedy, a bunch of years ago. But that's not something I wrote, and it's not a genre piece, so it's not something I tend to include among the stuff that I'm calling mine, because it was a sort of a collaboration with a really good friend of mine who wrote and starred in it with her family. So yeah,
Oh, okay, cool. What is it called though?
it's called The Bad Mother. Yeah,
Bad Mother. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
Cool. Cool.
yeah.
Now, where can people see all these three movies that you've mentioned?
Yeah, well, Rewire and Binge are not available online at this moment. I'm probably going to change that soon, because they did have festival runs at one point, and then I just never got around to just turning off the privacy stuff on them. So they're just on my Vimeo, and they're private right now. Rewire was on iTunes for like 7 years, but that's now expired. You can check, but I'm not sure. Not
Okay.
sure it's available on there anymore. But I think at some point I'm gonna just like put them on YouTube or
Okay.
Vimeo, or just turn off the privacy stuff on it, just put them out there again. So, but
Very good.
they played in a bunch of festivals around, and so that's where
Yeah.
you would have seen them. But yeah, there's no way to see them at this exact moment. But
Okay. Okay. But soon, soon enough. YouTube probably. Okay.
yeah,
What about Bad Mother?
yeah. Oh, I think that's on Amazon Prime, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken. So I think you can there. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Awesome.
yeah.
Now, okay, you touched on this a little bit. Do you have some new projects that you're planning that are coming down the pipe?
Yeah, too many.
Well,
Too
whatever you're able to talk about here.
I kind of switched gears late last year to being a first assistant director on film sets. So and
Mm,
that ended up just making me like stupidly busy this year. I've already assistant directed 3 features this year. I'm doing another one in October. I'm prepping for a web series with 50 sketches filming in Hamilton in September. That's
okay.
a comedy one. So the company that's producing that, LaRue Entertainment, is on board to produce another season of Creepy Bits. So we're going to be looking for money, uh, somebody else's money,
Yes. Yes.
to
Yes.
make another season.
Um,
And how to be different from this season is that they're going to be longer. They're going to be more like R-rated kind of thing. Like that, we won't be aiming for sort of a like a tween crowd on TikTok. We're going for adults, and so they'll be we're amping up the terror there.
cool.
And I'm also working with some other directors, some really cool Canadian horror film directors who I'm collaborating on that with. So the idea is that there's going to be 10 episodes and that we'll each direct 2 of them, and I will act as kind of like a showrunner to just sort of coordinate everything. um, so the other directors are Ashley Wessel, Adrian Bob, Sid Zanforlin, and Kelly Paoli. So hopefully we get the money and the 5 of us get to make some cool movies, and then we can talk again about it when it's done next year. So
Yes, absolutely. That would be terrific. Yes, do the update. And yeah, is there anything else you would like to mention, promote, anything like that before I move on to my typical questions that I give to
yeah,
everyone
sure.
who
Yeah.
takes
Well, I have a couple of more projects. So we're working with Sinking Ship Entertainment, which is a they do a lot of like Emmy and CSA award winning children's shows, but
Oh,
they've optioned a really cool like teen supernatural show
oh,
from us. It's called Limbo. And it's about a woman who moved, like a teenager and her family who move into a new house. Turns out the house is haunted by the teenager who used to live there. And he can't get out of the house because he's a ghost and he's trapped in the place that he died. However, he can get out of the house if he possesses someone. So the show is kind of about him getting the consent of the girl to possess her so that he can go and find his family. But then the girl also lost her dad recently, and when she's being possessed, she's kind of in the limbo world and can communicate with her father. So they kind of need each other.
yeah.
Uh, but there's kind of an uprising happening among these wayward ghosts who are not like completely gone yet. They're sort of they're fading, but they're not gone. They're in limbo.
Mm.
Um, and they've kind of decided that they don't want to be dead, and so they've started coming back into our world and possessing people at random without their consent
Uh,
uh, to kind of try and take back the world of the living. And there's a lot of them. So on top of this little kind of romantic type thing that they have to negotiate, they also have to fight off the hordes of spirits which are trying to invade our world. So that's the idea of the show.
that's a super
um,
cool premise. Super cool.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and got some great people working on that with me. Aurora Brown from the Baroness Fun Sketch Show is involved in that. She's one of the co-creators. Matthew McFadden, who's an actor as well as a playwright. He's been on Hardy Boys, and he just played a Romulan on Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, which is freaking awesome because
Yeah.
he's like a Scottish-looking redhead guy and dressed up as a Romulan. It's just so cool. And a good friend of mine from going way back, Nicole Stamp, who's been on a ton of stuff. She's also an actor, but she's also directing and producing her own shows now. So Nicole is famous as playing one of the villains on the it's a big web series, Carmilla. So they it's like a vampire web series. So she's got like a huge following as a result of being on this Kotex branded vampire show, basically. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So the 4 of us are the co-creators. We're working with Sinking Ship, and we're hoping that we can find a broadcaster for it in the next little while and put that one into production. So that's exciting. And then I have other stuff that are in various states of development, but I'm hoping to do like my own kind of horror or thriller feature. And I have some producers who are interested in working with me on it. So I just kind of have to refine the idea, and I've got a bunch of stuff going on. I have another feature that's ready to go, but it's outside of that budget range. So we're trying to come up with something else that we can do in kind of more of a micro budget feature range. So I got a lot of stuff going on, and then I'm just on set all the time. Like I've been like half the year probably on set this year, so it's been busy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's cool though. That's cool.
no, it's good. I mean, after doing nothing for 2 years, it's kind
Right.
of not complaining about it. Yeah, yeah,
There's nothing nice in between. There's no moderation. It's one or the other.
it really is.
Ridiculously busy or not.
From yeah, I mean, I went from like, hanging out with a 5-year-old to working on film sets almost instantly. So yeah,
Uh,
because now school's back and it doesn't sound like they're going to close them again anytime soon. I just my wife's got a busy job, so I had to pinch hit there. So I
okay.
did, and now I'm working.
Cool. Now I will just ask you my typical
Yeah,
questions that I always ask. Okay, so your favorite horror movie of all time and why?
yeah, that's hard. Because I kind of have like two favorites, but
Okay, fair.
yeah. So The Thing is
Mhm.
definitely among the top two. It's a movie that I feel like it's kind of got the perfect pacing. There's nothing that like it starts and it's just on. They're chasing this wolf in a helicopter, and you're just in. And just the level of special effects and some of those the iconic scenes. I just love it, and it's something that I keep coming back to. And then Alien as well,
Mhm.
the original one. I love the opening of it and how slow it is, and just like we really just take our time getting into what's going on there, and you don't really see anything kind of scary until like halfway through the film. And so I love the eeriness of it and the loneliness of it, and just the production design is ridiculous. Like Ridley Scott directed over 1,000. He art the production designer and production designed over 1,000 commercials before he started getting into directing. So, a couple of his movies are in my top five, I think, just because of the level of detail. So, Blade Runner is another one of my all-time favorite films, but it's not a horror. So, yeah,
Well, but it's still genre. It's still,
yeah.
it's weird enough. It still has a Halloween feel to it, if you get me, sort of, just because like the dark dystopian sort
Yeah,
of mood.
thriller for
So I
sure.
still
Yeah,
it's fun.
action thriller. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But
But The Thing and Alien for sure, I think are the one. And I have like I love other horror movies for other reasons, but
yeah,
those ones I think are kind of because I grew like at the time that I grew up, those movies were really like something, and I watched them on VHS as a kid with a friend in his basement. So it's just I think it's kind of just seared into my memory. And that's ultimately the kind of stuff I want to make too. Like so I kind of aspire to that kind of classic sort of 70s and 80s kind of horror, sci-fi horror. Yeah.
that makes total sense. Well, do you have like a favorite Canadian horror movie by any chance?
Uh, yeah, that one was harder. There are so many, but they tend to be like B movies, which I don't mind, but don't end up in my like. I enjoy watching them, but I
Yeah.
don't. They don't end up in my favorites. But
Yeah, we can
like
combine those questions. Favorite horror, favorite B
yeah,
movie
Cube. I
slash
mean,
Canadian.
I Cube. I still love Cube. I mean, that's another sci-fi horror. There's a bit of a theme going on here.
Mhm. Yep,
So.
yep.
I love the setup of it. I thought it was a great breakout film for Vincenzo Natali, and still like a really successful film that came out of the Canadian Film Center, and they don't have a lot of them released, so that's a really good one. And of course, like Black Christmas and stuff like
Yes.
that. But Black Christmas, like it's harder to watch now because there's been so many slashers, and they've borrowed from it so heavily. And even though they invented some of that language, like the whole phone ringing and like, where are you? And oh, it's in the house. Like that stuff came out of Black Christmas, but you see it everywhere now. So it feels like it's cliched, even though at the time it wasn't, right?
Yeah.
So it's that one's definitely more dated. But like in terms of Canadian horror, it's a real classic, and it was a precursor to Halloween and the whole '80s like slasher fest, right? So
Right.
it's
Yeah,
pretty
absolutely.
important canonically.
Yeah. Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
okay. How about um horror comedies, Canadian or otherwise, like or
You know, Yeah, well, there's a couple. I love Psycho Gorman,
yeah.
which in my opinion is a comedy. Uh, um, I thought it was great. I thought the practical effects were fantastic. And the little girl who's in it, I thought was amazing too. So I looked up who the casting director was, and I actually hired her to cast
Oh,
Creepy Bit. So So it's the same casting director, Ashley Hallahan. Hi, Ashley, you're great. Uh,
Cool.
so yeah, so she casted creepy bits, and it turns out that little girl in the movie is actually her niece. He was just like, "Hey, I want to audition for something," and she's like, "Well, why don't you try this?" And she ended up just being a phenomenon.
Awesome.
So yeah, she was great in that. And then I worked in March. I was the assistant director on a new movie that's not out yet called The Last Video Store. And so it's a couple of directors who are originally from Edmonton, now Vancouver based, Cody Kennedy and Tim Rutherford. And so they've done a bunch of shorts in this Last Video Store universe. And they've got a good friend, Kevin Martin, who owns an awesome actual DVD shop in Edmonton called the Lobby DVD shop. He just sent me their 17th anniversary T-shirt, so it's really cool. It's like the Poltergeist image of the girl at the TV, but it says the Lobby DVD shop in the Poltergeist lettering. So
Awesome.
uh, yeah, so basically what happens is this woman, her dad kind of dies or disappears or something, and leaves a bunch. All he leaves her is a bag of videotapes to return to the store. So she takes him to the store, um, and Kevin's there, and he's rewinding the videos. Kevin stars in the movie, by the way, playing himself as the owner of a video store. So it's pretty meta.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
among the videotapes that this woman brings back to the store is a bone carved VHS tape that is cursed. And when they put it in the VCR to rewind it, all the other movies around it and all the other VCRs, the villains and the characters start coming alive in the store, and then they have to fight them in the store. So it's going to be, I think, pretty hilarious. It's
Yeah.
called The Last Video Store, and it's slated to come out next year. So I think it's going to be a really fantastic Canadian horror B movie. So yeah, horror comedy. Yeah,
Is it
and
coming
it's
theatrically first?
yeah, I think their strategy is to film festivals and then maybe a small theatrical release, and
Cool.
then we'll see from there, kind of thing.
Awesome.
But yeah, that was a lot of fun to work on. A lot of fun gags in that one. So lots of crazy characters. There's a serial killer in this universe called Castor Creeley. And of course, in French, Castor means beaver, right? So he's got like a goalie mask shaped like a beaver. So he's got like big buck teeth. And his weapon is a goalie stick that's like where he's taped the skates on it and made it into like an axe, right? So it's like
Yeah.
a very Canadian slasher,
Mhm.
basically serial killer. Yeah. Yeah, so it's got a lot of great fun stuff in it, and I think people are gonna love it. So, and Kevin's a great guy, and his video store it still exists and it's real, and it's in Edmonton. And if you're in Edmonton, you should go and check it out and say hi. So yeah,
Sweet. I have to check it out sometime. I haven't
yeah,
been to Edmonton yet, and so I gotta go.
yeah,
Wow, cool.
yeah.
Oh, I know we covered this a little bit already, but well, any other non-Canadian B movies that you like?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not like a huge B movie fan,
That's okay.
but I've seen a bunch, like, Wolf Cop is
Yeah, yeah,
funny, Rubbers, like pretty ridiculous, Toxic Avenger, Chopping Mall, Sharknado, like there's there's, there's a bunch, but like I'm not a huge B movie fan to begin with, so I tend to kind of go for the more psychological and more serious kind of stuff. Like I'm also not like super into heavy violence and gore either. So
yeah,
I like the slow burns and the ones that build up an atmosphere, and like I don't mind if they're violent, but I don't want that to be like the only thing about it. Like it's
yeah.
just the
Like
violence.
gore porn, basically. Yeah,
War porn, yeah, that
yeah,
kind of thing. That's not really my bag. So yeah.
yeah. That's cool. What about writers, authors, horror authors, writers? Yeah.
Yeah, I am ashamed to say this, but I don't read very much. Like
Ah,
I watch a ton of stuff, but
oh,
it's really probably been since like high school since I read horror novels, and of course it was all Stephen King. So and he's great, and I love Stephen King because he's very accessible, and he always has great characters that are not rich and famous, and they live in small towns, and there's always something unsettling about his stories, and I've loved a lot of them. I remember in high school reading The Tommy Knockers, which is not one of his better novels, but the setup on that was just terrifying to me. Like this somebody finding like a bit of a flying saucer in the woods and then digging it up, and and I love the idea that aliens have already been here and are influencing things, but we just don't really like know about it. So I love, and again, it's horror sci-fi, so
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah, I'm getting the theme.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I would love to do something with aliens and spaceships at some point, but you need more money to do those types of things. So yeah,
Generally, yeah,
yeah,
you get the help. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I was a
well,
big X-Files fan,
uh,
in the '90s and stuff. So I didn't really like the reboots so much, but the original X-Files, I was a big fan of it. Watched it regularly on TV when it was out,
cool.
and I've rewatched it since. So,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
nice, nice.
yeah.
Good mention. Um, well, last but not least, what is your Halloween ritual?
Well, I can't really do it anymore that my daughter is around because it involves me scaring myself in the woods by myself. But
Oh, interesting.
yeah, I don't know. When I was younger, I think I was kind of more anxious, and so if I was home alone, I would sort of start getting paranoid. So I think in my starting in my 30s, I would try and I was aware of the fact that it was irrational, and I was trying to kind of push through it by just putting myself in these eerie situations and just not run away and see how long I could go before I had to run away from it. But now
Cool.
that I have a kid, it's pumpkins and going around with them trick or treating, and then
Yes, yes.
if we can get around to it, my wife and I will watch some horror movies on TV and stuff. We pre kids we used to like watching horror movies, so
Yeah.
it's something we used to do. But I think post kids, my wife is more into like RuPaul's Drag Race than the Human Centipede or Man.
Yeah. Well,
Like
that's
yeah,
a little
she
extra.
thinks lighter, fluffier things. So much into the and horror movies have gotten scarier and more violent over time, I think. Uh,
Yeah.
we don't watch as many as we used to, but I do. Like I will. And I had a 19-year-old cousin visiting me from Portugal recently, and he grew up playing video games, so he really hadn't watched many movies.
Okay.
And then he came out and he volunteered on the last video store and helped out. And he loved it. He wants to try and come back to Canada and work in the film industry and stuff if he can wing it. And he's young, so he might be able to figure it out. But as a result of him being here and not having watched any movies, I'm like, oh well, you have to watch this and you have to watch that. You have to watch that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I got to rewatch a whole bunch of movies that I loved in order to introduce him to those movies. So that was fun. Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, Halloween rituals, watching scary movies and trying to psych myself out are
Yeah,
things that I do. Yeah.
cool. Excellent. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you, David. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah.